afternoon and welcome to our Education and Family Focus webinar. With Back to Work the focus for many organisations over the summer, this will be a busy time for the global mobility sector and those managing international employees. Business travel is back on the agenda and international assignments previously on hold are being reviewed, while repatriation is a reality for many. As companies play catch-up over the summer and early autumn, we provide a wealth of knowledge and expertise to help you support employees and families on the move again. So welcome to our panel of expert presenters today. We have Françoise Zurbach, Head of EIFA International School in London, Johanna Mitchell, Director of Lumos Education, and Brenda Levis, President, NYC Navigator, destination service provider from the USA and winner of our Best Destination Service Provider Awards 2020. And in addition, we're going to hear from Gail Penelo, Executive Director of Focus, her two guests, Mary Burke-Tobias, Director of Admissions, Marymount, London, and Sophie Taylor, Relocation Manager of Sterling Lexicon. And we'll also have a contribution from Robert Stitch, Principal of Garden International School in Malaysia. So this is our conversation agenda for today. Françoise Zurbach, Head of EIFA International School, Johanna Mitchell, Director of Lumos Education, and Brenda Levis, President of NYC, who are going to talk around these subjects. There is a chat facility, so do send in your questions. So in conversation with Françoise, who has an expansive knowledge of French and English bilingualism, we'll explore how bilingual education for children is a stepping stone to wider prospects and opportunities. We'll discover how their schools and organisations have responded to the impact of COVID-19 and the current challenges, and find out how to secure the right places and property even at the last minute. And in an age of increased awareness around employee engagement, we'll explore the secrets of setting employees and families smoothly and successfully in a new location as the new normal emerges. So Françoise,
yes,
a fascinating background which many international assignees will relate to. So how did your experience as a bilingual child influence your career and interest in linguistic diversity? And perhaps you can explore a bit of the benefits of multilingual education.
Sure. Hi, Fiona, and hi to people who are listening. So yes, I can say that I really experienced it as a child because I was brought up in Morocco, and then my family moved to Canada. So I went to an English school in Canada because my mother didn't speak a word of French and my parents used to speak English in between them. And so I went to Montreal to an English school until I was about 10 years old. And then my parents decided to move to France. My mother was a great admirer of the Général de Gaulle, who was president of France at those times. And for her, as a British person, first of all, she couldn't stand the winters anymore because she had been brought up in Burma. And so she wanted to move to France, to a more European country. So I was there, 10 years old. My sister was 13. We didn't have a word of French, and we were just put into a school, obviously French school, girls' school, because before 1968, boys and girls were not in the same classes. You had girls' schools and boys' schools. And I just had to learn how to speak French. So I was totally immersed in this French classroom. And in the beginning, I didn't understand a word of what was going on. And my parents told me later that I used to lock myself in the bathroom and speak a language that was neither French nor English for about a month. And then I just picked it up. And that's why when parents come to see me and say that they're worried because their child is 7 or 8 and doesn't have a word of French or a word of English, how are they going to manage? And I always say, just be a little bit patient, because the way we teach the languages in EIFA is the total immersion in both languages, and the children pick it up. So a bit later, I became a teacher, which I always wanted to do since I was small. And I wanted to introduce English when I was teaching in primary school. In 1992, the French government said, took really importance and felt importance of teaching foreign languages to children. So obviously English was the one that everybody wanted to learn, but we were only allowed to teach 1.5 hours per week. And that was really not enough for me. I would have liked to really teach more English, but it wasn't possible because, the French system is quite rigorous and everybody had to do the same. So I thought that I wanted to share my experience with my pupils in year 6. So I taught year 6 for about 15, 16 years. And I started to organize back-to-back exchanges with the United States so that my class could go over to America and then we could receive the children, host the children. So there was an organization called La Ligue de l'Enseignement that still does those back-to-back. And so I took my pupils for 2 weeks in an American school in different places in the United States. So they first started to talk to each other with their American family. And when I started, there was no internet. So everything was by, emails. We used to, not by emails, by letters. So we had to send, photos of the school, photos of the house, and if there was a pet. And then we used to put the children together. And then off we went with the children. Took about 25 children every time to an American class in different places of the United States. And after, so obviously the little French children were trying to speak English. They had knowledge of English, which the Americans didn't have any knowledge of French. So obviously they were speaking much more English. And then the little Americans would come a bit later in the year for 3 weeks. And there was another chance for our French children to practice their English. And after, at the beginning of September, October, when they went to the senior school, I was working quite closely with the teachers, and they always used to say, I can point out immediately the children who've been, to America, because they were much more confident and spontaneous and motivated to speak English. So I know how important the bilingual education is. And then I had the chance to come to England. I was appointed as the head of a bilingual school that is part of the Lycée Charles de Gaulle as an expat for 5 years. And that was an amazing experience. And that experience helped me also for what I'm doing now, which is being the head of EIFA in central London. And in the previous school, the children used to have a teaching of English 2 days and a half. So it was 2 days and a half in English and 2 days and a half in French. And that meant that if there was no French or no English at home, they could stay 4 days or 4 days and a half without hearing the other language. At EIFA, we do things differently. So the children are immersed in both languages every day. And I really think that it's the best way of doing things because it's important for children to speak both languages every day rather than having this, this shared between the week.
So this is all about the immersion. So Johanna, can I introduce you? Joanne, is that your experience as an education consultant?
Yes, it is. And I think what Françoise said about the confidence of a child being able to speak 2 or more languages, it's so important. And many of our families, and many of the families that Françoise deals with have parents who have at least 2 nationalities and maybe 2 or 3 passports. So they're very accustomed to moving around the world. They want their children to have a sense of global mobility, global mindedness, and they are aware that being bilingual will give their children added advantages that other children don't have, greater access to jobs and greater global mobility in the long term. So it's absolutely, it's vital, bilingualism in our culture now. Thank you.
Yeah. And this switching backwards and forwards, I think, Françoise, is what helps the multitasking, and that's what gets the brain.
Yes, that's what the recent studies, there's always different studies about bilingualism, and one of the latest one is the book from Albert Costa, which is called The Bilingual Brain. And in this book, he explains that when you speak 2 languages, sometimes most of the times you have one language that's stronger than the other, because, for example, for me, it's French. You can hear, because sometimes I hesitate and search for my words. But it's the most important thing is not so much being a perfect bilingual person. The most important and the most effect on the cognitive development is this switch between the two languages. Because if you're speaking to a French person, you're going to, because the language is above all a culture and you're a cultural person. So when you're speaking in French, and to a French person, for example, you're not going to speak in the same way as if you speak in English to an English person. And because it's a whole block, it's the culture, the feeling, the emotions, they come out differently. And when you have two languages, you can sort of switch between these two languages and think, okay, I could say this better in English, or I could say it better in French. I was thinking, for example, I've been hearing a lot of journalists, English, who use the word naive a lot, but that word probably does not exist in English, or it's not so precise, and we also use English words. So it's the enrichment that both languages bring to the thoughts and the brain, and the more words you have, the more thoughts you have, and the better you can express those thoughts. And two languages, or three, most of our pupils at school even have three or sometimes four. And I'm always amazed to see little children switching from English to French, and then dad, who's Arabic, pops in the school, and then they run down and start speaking Arabic. And I'm just amazed. I'm looking at them and thinking it's just unbelievable how these children can learn several languages.
And Brenda, you as your destination service provider, NYC Navigator, you must come across that a lot, don't you, in your experience dealing with families on international assignment?
Absolutely. I think for us, we see a lot of parents that if they were raised in another culture or had international opportunities as children, then they really want to have the same opportunity for their kids to have experiences growing up in multiple cultures. I think we see also that kids who have grown up in bilingual families and have had international experience tend to bring less bullying to a classroom. They're much more empathetic and accepting of kids from other cultures. And I think also just that you need to start kids young with a global mindset in order to achieve global citizens later on in life.
Great, thank you. So Françoise, back to you again. So you highlighted the bilingual aspect of EIFA. Can you tell us a bit more about why parents choose your school? It's in London.
Yeah, sure.
What about?
Yeah, so we are situated really in central London, not very far from the BBC, walking distance. So obviously that's a good location for parents who are moving in, working around the school or in businesses. We have very small numbers. The maximum size of our classes is 20 per class, and we hardly have any classes who comes to that number of children per class. We also have EAL, which is English as an additional language, and French as an additional language teachers who come into the class and help the children, support them if they don't understand everything that's going on, but they also can take them in small groups or individual lessons to help them improve the French or the English. The parents love the family atmosphere of the school because we only have 2 classes per age group. So it's a relatively small school, and we want to keep it in that way. Also, we do not select our pupils. That means that when they come into the school, even if they're 7 or 8 and they don't have any French at home or English at home, it's for us, to make them learn and enjoy learning foreign languages. So we do not test our pupils when they come in. Our curriculum is really well balanced between the French curriculum and the British one. So we try to take the best of both of curriculums. What could I say else? Well, we take children from a very young age, from 21 months. So, and we are thinking of even taking them younger because parents always ask, could you take my child? He's 1, and we know how important it is to start early. So I think that all this particularity of EIFA is really also that we try to give a curriculum that is that follows the British and the French, what they ask for, but also we try to help every single child to achieve their potential. So if they need extra support, they're given extra support. If we feel that the child is brilliant in one subject and needs more, we give more. And I think that our small numbers allow that as well.
Yes, great. And we've got people coming in with the chat agreeing with this. There's somebody there saying, that's so true. I get asked, say something in another language, and I've had a hard time coming up with something. But if someone comes up to me and speaks a different language, I have no problem switching my brain over. So there you are. So that's Keeney Lindblom. So thank you for commenting, and other people joining in. Thank you. So we've had the overview of the school, but let's now go over to Johanna to give us a bit more of a perspective about the education consultant's viewpoint. Was there anything else you wanted to flag up there?
Yeah, I'm very interested in what Françoise had to say about how she incorporates the British and the French systems at EIFA. I think EIFA does a great job of doing this, but Françoise, what's the difference between what EIFA does and the traditional French system that's regulated by the French government?
So, for example, if we take the subject of learning how to read, in the French system, you start working on the phonics in grande section, which is year 1. So you're going to start slowly to work on that. In the English system, you start phonics from the age of 4, where you start studying different sounds. So so you learn how to read earlier in the British system than you would in the French. So what we do is that we teach our children how to read, starting like an English school would on the English side. Okay, so that's in reception and year 1. And then when they arrive to year 2 in their classroom, they already know how to read in English. Obviously, you carry on, and then we start learning how to read in French. And as I often tell parents, you only learn how to read once in your life. What you do after is you transfer the skills from one language to another. Another difference compared with a French traditional school is that we do more art. We've got the children have an art teacher, music teacher, a ballet teacher. So we do more activities around the creativity, which is more like an English school would do. So it's really trying to do the sort of rigorous French approach to teaching, but also bring all the creativity and the child-centered approach that the British would do with their pupils. So it's really a sort of mix, of both of the systems. Because I worked in a more French traditional. When I was at Charles de Gaulle, it was a little more, although we did use obviously elements of the British curriculum, but it was a little more, I would say, a little more French than we are. And also what we try to do is open the children to other, not only the British and French system, but we do international events, and we try to value other languages that the children can speak at home.
I think that's fascinating, and I love the fact that you value the English early reading age, which is great for some people. But some of our clients who are relocating, say from Europe or Russia or the former Russian states, their children learn to read later. So some they prefer that because they find it too young, and it's interesting to see what different families will prefer.
Yeah, and I asked my the head. We've got a head of early years, Rebecca, at school, and I asked her, why do you think that in the English system you start so early with the phonics, like at 3-4? And she said, because in fact there's so many different sounds in English, there's many more sounds to learn, and from a French point of view, for me, it was more difficult to learn how to read in French than in English, but apparently not. There's many more sounds in English, so that's why they start earlier, I think.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so now over to some more burning issues where we'll explore a bit more fully. But now let's go on to talking about the impact of COVID, and that's how that is all affecting you. So I think, Johanna, if we can just have a quick look at your background. We've heard some details about your education consultancy, but let's hear from you how you think COVID is impacting your clients and children and how that relates to supporting families.
Sure. Thank you, Fiona. I think COVID has had a big impact on working parents and on employees and families as a whole, because especially relocating families haven't been able to relocate. So they've been, in their home country, or perhaps they were relocating back to their home country and they're stuck in their host country. So that has been a real issue. We've had to provide a lot of online tuition for our families to enable them to continue access to education. Some schools globally have provided brilliant online programs, and Françoise's school EIFA was one of the schools in London, as well as Queensgate, who had a brilliant online program. But not every school has had that. So we've had to step in and provide that support for families to enable the children to have a continuity of education. The other issue is that some countries have been on lockdown at different times to other countries. So we have a family at the moment in a former Russian state who are on lockdown till the 1st of August, hoping to relocate to London, and they're unable to. And the other issue is the quarantine regulations that have been changing, the 14 days in Europe and the UK. So again, this has placed a lot of strain on families. So we've really tried to support families as much as we possibly can, both educationally and culturally through Zoom. And all of our cultural programs, for example, have been delivered to companies and to families via Zoom during this period. And as much as we can, when families are able to come to London, we support them face to face. But it has been a case of really allaying parents' fears and trying to fill in those gaps that have been caused by the pandemic.
Thank you very much. Brenda, if we can have a word with you now. Brenda Levis, as we've said, is president of NYC Navigator, the DSP in the USA. So we had a brief discussion before we met up, Brenda, and you went through a lot of fascinating things in the US that really are front of mind for a lot of people managing international assignments and for those who are already there. So can you perhaps highlight some of these areas like visas and leases broken, isolation, logistics, all those sorts of things?
Sure. Thank you, Fiona. We've had families that have come in during COVID into the United States where they had little ones that weren't able to start school. Families didn't really even know how to go about or get kids into Zoom classes and whether that would be something they would want to do in a foreign country. So I think that put a lot of strain both on family life at home for the little ones not being able to make any new friends, but also for the parents not being able to meet anybody in their new community. I think that was a very challenging time for them. We also had families that came over just prior to COVID that secured leases in the United States, and they have not yet been able to occupy those apartments. And it looks like they probably won't be able to occupy them in 2020 at all. So we've been trying to help them to break leases. But that's also really tough on the families to be in limbo and not know what's next and how long this holding pattern is going to last.
And then the immigration situation and getting visas, that must have upset a lot of moves.
Exactly. So on top of COVID, then we have this executive order that's keeping many visa holders out of the United States for the foreseeable future, at least through 2020, and it could also go into 21. So that's really it's really caused a blow to the whole global mobility industry in the United States. And I know it's affecting folks overseas with Americans not being able to go to other countries as well.
And some of the personal, I think you try and tailor your support to individuals. And you were talking about some people's change of circumstance when they find themselves in the States and in lockdown. And I think you were talking about a new mother or how you'd had to support her. that period?
Yeah, so we were really concerned when COVID set in, even just thinking of us as Americans having to stay at home and not being able to go to an office. I know I felt extremely isolated being in New York and not having family around and not being able to see friends. So we made it a point to go through and reach out to everyone that had relocated in the past year. And we'd made phone calls initially, and if we couldn't reach them via phone, then we sent emails. And people were very grateful for that and appreciated the contact, and that just we cared about them. A lot of them did have questions that we could help them out with at that time. Then we took what we used to do. We used to have bi-weekly live events, and we pivoted and started having those online. So we continue to have weekly webinars where folks have an opportunity to connect. And for example, as you mentioned, we have a couple of pregnant moms right now that they can't have their families come to be with them from overseas. They're trying to navigate pregnancy in a foreign country. They have met people through our group, and we're talking about doing a virtual baby shower for them. We've connected them with other people from their own country that have had babies in the US, so they don't feel quite so isolated, and they can get tips from them on how they managed even to find baby products from their home countries here in the States. With the speakers that we've brought in our weekly events, we started with an expat psychologist at the beginning to talk through feelings of COVID. And then we've brought in everything from nutritionists to personal trainers. We brought in an educational specialist to talk about teaching kids at home. And we even had a comedy show, which was really fun for everybody to just let off some steam and have a good time.
Yes, great, good. Well, that's a really good selection of support. Now we're going to go over and find out what other organisations have been doing to support COVID, and then we'll come back to our presenters here for their views on anything new that's emerged. So we're going to now hear a conversation earlier in the month that we had with Gail Penelo, who's the Executive Director of Focus, the expat membership group run for expats by expatriates. And she had invited two guests, Sophie Taylor, Relocation Manager of Sterling Lexicon, and Mary Burke Tobias, Director of Admissions of Marymount, London. And this is what they had to talk about. Welcome to this Education and Family Focus webinar. And today I'm in conversation with Gail Penelo, Executive Director of Focus, Mary Burke Tobias, Director of Admissions Marymount, and Sophie Taylor, Relocation Manager of Sterling Lexicon. And this is our agenda for today. So Gail, can you give us a little bit about what Focus does?
So Focus was actually founded in 1982, which makes us 38 years old, and we've been helping thousands of people settling into the UK from all kinds of different countries and backgrounds. So most of them would be sent by their companies, and the company offering the membership, the Focus membership, to their assignees, and which we will provide them support. And we have resources, 38 years of resources of living in the UK. We have a very, very successful program, which is the Career Development Program, which is aiming to the partner, because when usually most of the time the couple actually moves into the UK, one of them has a job, but the other one has to follow. So the other partner is usually a bit frustrated because he has to give up everything back in their country to actually come to live with the loved one. And so that's why we come in the picture, because we will help the partner to actually find a job, to go back to whatever they are working in. And so we have put in place lots of different workshops, lots of different events, helping them to go back to work.
So how have you had to adapt your services to take account of the new COVID restrictions? And now, of course, we are sort of, certainly in the UK, less locked down and people going back to work.
Yes. So we managed to actually keep everything as planned, which was great, because all the events we were planning on having face-to-face were being held remotely. So we offered everything we were supposed to, which I'm very proud of. So we even published our magazine during lockdown. So yeah, everything went very well, and actually it helped way more people than I thought, because we were able to reach out to people who were far away, and because lots of them went back home or somewhere else to lock down. And so even those people who would have not been able to attend any events face to face have been able to attend all our events online. So it worked very well.
Good, great. Now, what about you, Sophie? How have things had to change from your perspective?
So for the assignees who were able to travel, because of course a lot of them have seen their assignment being put on hold due to the travel restrictions, but those that were able to travel and needed to find an accommodation, we've been arranging virtual tours whereby we provided the assignees access to videos of properties that we'd sourced and which were in line with their requirements. We've also been able to assist assignees with finding serviced accommodation. So for those that weren't able to move into a rental property or permanent accommodation, we assisted with sourcing temporary accommodation in the form of a serviced apartment. And for those assignees who returned to their home country, who were on assignment in the UK, we were able to assist with the packing of their goods and removal back to their home country without the assignee being present. So we were able to FaceTime the assignees whilst packing their items to make sure that we were packing the correct item and not the landlord's belongings.
And what about you, Mary? What happened about your families, your borders? Are they still in the UK? And how are you supporting families coming in now?
So Marymount London closed 1 week prior to the UK government making its decision. That allowed us, fortunately, enough time to get all of our students back to their home country. And we were able to continue with online learning from day one. IB learners and teachers really thrive in a creative, collaborative, and interdisciplinary environment. And so although this situation certainly was not ideal, it really did teach us all how to dig deep and learn new skills along the way. And just like Sophie, we continued on with virtual tours. The admissions team continued to partner with families. There were some families who were going to be relocating into the UK whose relocations were put on hold, but have chosen to send their daughters to Marymount ahead of time, so to get their transition started. So again, we've worked very closely to assist those families in getting their daughters ready for this important transition. At Marymount, as I mentioned, we have students from over 42 different nationalities. So every student at one point or another has been the new student. So we work very hard to partner with the families and the students so they feel that Marymount is their home even before landing on UK soil.
And what do you think are the biggest challenges at the moment? So let's go over to you, Sophie. Quarantine's been introduced for some countries, and in others it's more easy for people to travel. What do you think are the biggest challenges now at the moment?
Yes, certainly quarantine does seem to be the biggest challenge at the moment for relocations to the UK. The reason being, as you know, it just means that signees aren't able to go and view properties whilst in quarantine. We have offered a service whereby we would purchase groceries for signees and families and have them delivered to their temporary accommodation. That's certainly a challenge, but also despite some of the restrictions being lifted, we do see that letting agents still seem to favour virtual viewings as opposed to face-to-face viewings.
And what about the admissions process then, Mary? Is that still all virtual? How are you coping with? And is there going to be a big backlog and a sudden rush in July and August, do you think?
You know, admissions has been pretty consistent since February and March. Certainly, it's a bit of an ebb and a flow, but there are definitely families still looking at new schools, both within the UK and outside the UK. And that's really one of the keystones of what Marymount offers, is that some families are looking 6 months or 2 years ahead of time in terms of a move. And some, you know, just like today, called and just found out that they will be moving in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And we're able to adapt and work with them in an efficient manner, because our goal is the same as theirs. We want to make sure that we place their daughter in an environment where she's going to thrive, experience success, and make a seamless transition.
So what about you, Sophie? Do you think there's going to be panic stations at the end of the summer?
I mean, certainly within the relocation industry, July and August are usually our busiest months. We do estimate that this year moves will probably be delayed to September or even October. Our main advice is always for clients to give us as plenty notice as possible in order for us to make preparation in advance, and so we can start viewing process early on.
Yeah. And what about you, Gail? Do you think there's going to be some panic stations going on in July and August? And how can you help with that when people suddenly realise that they're coming to the UK?
Well, I think, yes, it might change a bit, but we are ready. We know it's going to be a bit a bit of a challenge in the next 2 months, but we are ready. And I think it's a good time to come to the UK at the moment, because there is lots of places in the schools, empty, lots of spaces, and the lettings as well is doing it's pretty easy to find something at this stage compared to a few years ago. So I think it's a good timing to come to the UK at the moment.
Well, Gail, thank you very much for introducing your guests, Mary and Sophie, and thank you so much for joining us on a very informative conversation about families and education. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Fiona.
I was just saying, Françoise, it would be interesting to hear from you how your school's preparing for the new term and your views, which I think many parents are concerned about, whether they should be doing extra work during the holidays. So can you perhaps tell us a bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, of course. So one thing is I would tell the parents not to do extra work during the holidays and take the children away from the screens for some time. But this is because of the situation of our school, because our school closed a little earlier, 1 week earlier than the other UK schools closed. And we went straight to the teaching online. So the children had every single subject that was taught online, even yoga, even dance, even art. And so we just followed the curriculum, and the children, the teachers and the children managed to go through the whole curriculum. So at the 6th, 7th of July, they had gone through the program, the curriculum. So our advice was to tell parents now that take the children off of the screens as much as you can. But I know it's not the same case in all the schools. And for the future, obviously, we're very excited that we're going to be able to open the school if everything goes well. But we are still going to provide some sort of online teaching and teaching at school. So that means that the children would be at school, obviously, most of them, if everything goes well and there's no second wave or they don't tell us to close the school. But some families are still abroad, as Gail was explaining. Some families haven't come back because the relocation is delayed, or because maybe somebody in the family has a problem like asthma or something else. So what we want to do is to be able to do both at the same time. So teaching in class, and also for children or older children, pupils who are abroad or who cannot come for different reasons, they can still follow what's happening in the class. So we're doing a lot of work in the summer to put all this in place. Brilliant. And hopefully it should be up and running in September.
Thank you. And Johanna, perhaps you'd like to comment on what your thoughts are for people not in such a fortunate position, who are really worried about children with exams coming up, or not being able to manage the homeschooling, and children in state schools, or stuck in the wrong country.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Fiona. I think it's very difficult for families who haven't been to a school like EIFA, who's provided a really comprehensive online education program during the lockdown. So for families who are concerned about GCSEs and A-levels in 2021, for example, we offer a full online tutoring program to help children. Families who are relocating between education systems, so for example, families coming from, we've got a family coming from the French at the moment to the British system, which is very different, as Françoise will bear out. We've got an online tutoring program for those children, both to get them au fait with English, but also the differences in the ways that maths and the sciences are taught, so that when they finally come over to the UK in September, they're going to be really well prepared. Also, the UK university entrance is going to be, I think, quite different when we get the A-level results in August, because there are some students who are taking a gap year because they're very worried about having lectures online and they don't want to pay the fees for a year. So I think we will see places coming up at Russell Group universities. And for those students who are preparing for medical exams in the autumn and the Oxford and Cambridge entrance exams, the summer is a brilliant time if you've got time to prepare for those. And we've got excellent tutors and teachers who can prep students for medical interviews and for Oxford and Cambridge entrance. And I think that's great. But certainly, Françoise, I mean, we shouldn't have our children studying over the summer at all, ideally, because they should be resting. But for those families who, you know, need to study or who are relocating, we've got another family coming from Hong Kong, and we expect a big influx because of the new law that China are passing. Again, we're preparing that family online for the relocation between the Hong Kong and the British system.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Joanne, for those comments. So Brenda, perhaps highlight some of the things that you feel were a bit different in the US, or maybe complement what Focus were talking about, and Joanne and Françoise.
Sure. I actually had a question for Johanna about whether you're seeing families postpone their assignments, or perhaps the working employee might move ahead and leave the family behind temporarily because they're intimidated by homeschooling in a foreign country.
We've got one family coming from a former Russian state who I think may postpone their assignment for a year. We have a lot of families coming who were coming from China, mainly to board, and also who are attending university starting in September, October. And, you know, most of our Chinese families are postponing for a year because they're actually quite worried about the virus. And that's throwing up all sorts of issues around school fees and university fees and school fee refunds. So what we find is most independent schools are being very, very understanding about refunds, and they are refunding fees for Chinese families who are unable to come. Also for British families and other international families, we're seeing good reductions, so 10 or 20% reduction on school fees to represent the not lighting, you know, or heating the buildings. But schools are telling us that teachers are their main expense, which of course they are. And because teachers have been employed throughout the lockdown, 80 to 90% of the cost of school fees is paying for those teachers. University fee refunds are a different matter, and I think because universities are now in a very difficult financial position, especially as students are deferring. If a student started, we had a student start Cambridge last October and then go back home to China, there was no refund from the university. So I think we, in answer to your question, Brenda, we just have to, we have a lot of families who are postponing, and we also have families who, we've got the working parent coming, but his wife and children staying over in their home country because they're a little bit worried about how it's going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Thank you.
You must spend a lot of time giving moral and psychological support to those families. Both of you, Brenda and Johanna. I mean, that's really, your roles are really essential, because families don't know what to do and where to turn to when a situation like that occurs. So thank God.
Absolutely. I think what all three of us do, I think, is very holistic, and you too, Françoise, is that when we have a family, we're not just looking at the child's education, we're looking at the emotional well-being, the cultural transition. And Françoise, as you rightly said, I speak 5 languages, and when I speak, another language, I am automatically in the culture of that country. And when we have a family relocating, it's just preparing them, even the tiny little differences. For example, as you well know, the difference between, I'm half French, the difference between having a French and a British sense of humor. I mean, it's so huge, and it can really be debilitating if you don't understand the English sarcasm and irony. And we did a brilliant workplace program for a French employee who's relocating recently to explain this, so that they would understand that if they were joking, perhaps the French employee wouldn't find that funny at all. So it's looking at everything in the round. It's the holistic, it's the emotional, it's the educational, it's the cultural, it's the well-being of the accompanying spouse or partner. We have to look at that. And I know, Brenda, you're very good at hand-holding, and this is something that, it's a little bit difficult to do when you're on Zoom, but I think it's much better than just giving somebody a PowerPoint presentation over the internet. This close observation of the family and what those needs are makes for a very successful relocation. And so many assignments fail because that hasn't been done properly.
Well, that's a very neat introduction, Joanne. Thank you very much to what we're going to talk about next, which is about settling families. So we're now going to go over and hear what Robert Stitch, the principal of Garden International School in Malaysia, had to say about how his school, which was the winners of our School Providing Outstanding Relocation Support Award this year, his great advice for other schools how to settle families successfully. So if I can just remind our presenters to turn off their microphones, and let's hear what Robert Stitch has to say. Hello, Rob. As winner of our award, can you tell us what's special about Garden International School?
First of all, I'd like to say we were thrilled to win this award, and I think it's due recognition of one of the things, many things, that is special about GIS. So I'll talk about that first and foremost, and then some of the other things that I think are also special about the school. We are a really close-knit community, and I think this particular award recognises the fact that we're a close-knit community. And one part of that community is how we induct new staff, new students, and new parents into the school. That GIS, in terms of their induction processes, is head and shoulders above any other school that I've worked in or any other school that I've visited. So I think it's great recognition about what is special about GIS in terms of the community.
And what did it mean winning the award for the school and the community?
We were thrilled to win the award. It's really good to have some really good news to share with the community. We're thrilled when we put this onto the website and into the school newsletters and shared it with the staff and the students. So I think they felt we were rightful winners. But it's always good to get that pat on the back.
Good. Well, congratulations, and we loved your participation in the virtual award video. That was fantastic. So let's move on now and talk about the challenges for parents and employers of selecting the right international school, particularly under these conditions when parents can't visit. But of course, many relocating families don't have time to visit the school in advance anyway. So just tell us a bit about your admissions process. What's the availability for 2021 and the following year? And of course, if families need admissions throughout the year.
Yeah, it's a challenge for all international schools wherever they are in the world. I mean, first and foremost, I would say that we're a tier 1 school with an incredible reputation. I mean, our reputation is not just in Malaysia, it's across Southeast Asia and across the world. I do believe, I think about 10 years ago, Guardian International was rated as one of the top 10 international schools in the world in a Guardian article on international education. So that reputation obviously attracts, parents. That's the biggest decision that parents make, right? The biggest challenge at the moment, of course, is the borders are shut. But at the moment, we're operating under those border controls. So word of mouth is very strong for a school like GIS. We have phone calls. Before the lockdown, we had a number of walk-ins, people just who were in Malaysia, coming into the school and asking for a admissions tour or a look around the school. And then it goes to the application process. That can be done online, which has been good at the moment because it has been difficult to get the application process done physically in school.
Brilliant, great. So people who've been through the process before will know, but for others, it's quite easy to pick up. So the COVID-19 crisis, can you tell us what you did with the school closures and how you were managing online learning? And then also, I understand you've got some imaginative things that you're offering, not just pupils of your schools, but people outside the area and overseas to access.
I've been in education for 36 years, and by far the most challenging year that I've had in education. I don't think any school leader could have been fully prepared for what's happened this year. We're now looking positively to a school opening on the 14th of August, and we're putting our SOPs in place for all the different year groups and phases in the school. And the lockdown here in Malaysia was a very restrictive lockdown. Some would say draconian, but it worked really well. I mean, it was basically you were not allowed out of your apartments or your houses, apart from one person in the family could go to the supermarket for a short period a day, and it was a real sort of lockdown. So transitioning into a continuity of learning, we use that phrase because we wanted to show that we could be as much as possible seamless, although it's impossible to be seamless between a physical environment and a home learning environment. We had a continuity of learning program, which we developed, I think, really well. And we were building a robust model, I think, which will stand us in good stead if we have to go down this particular route again. We were all experiencing that anxiety of, when is this going to end? How is it going to impact on us, socially, economically, etc., and educationally. Additional to the sort of education, we saw the importance of the well-being and also for activities which were co-curricular or extracurricular. So we developed an element of our website called Smarter, Stronger Together, which is a fantastic sort of collection of activities that parents and students and anybody in the community can be involved in, and so we also did webinars. We had a virtual CCA program going on, which is a co-curricular program going on every night after school, which was really good. So we were doing things like, Zumba classes, chess, cooking classes, and I think all those kind of things help keep the community together.
It's fantastic the way that international schools have stepped up and have been supporting the community and other schools in the area. So thank you. So now here's a really important issue, obviously, for all parents about what you do to help settle the children and transition, but also how the school can help settle the whole family, which is really important to employers when they're moving someone into the area.
As soon as the offers are made and the fees are collected, at that particular stage, induction begins. So it's not when the students and the parents walk through the door. It's at that particular moment when they've officially become a member of the GIS family. So connections are made with the school, access to a lot of things that are going on, newsletters, giving parents and students a feel of what the school will be like. If we are at the stage to, for example, a primary kid, know which class that student will be going into, the teacher will be in contact, and there will be a connection that's made even before they've arrived, long time before they've arrived. We start to try to buddy up families as well. We use our Parent Teachers Association who help us with this, and they start to look at how they would buddy up with different families. So a lot of this is induction begins even before the families physically arrive in KL or physically come to the school. Then we have a really, I think, fantastic event which is called the New Family Induction, which is a whole morning event and goes into the afternoon, where new families come in. There's a degree of formality around the initial parts of it, but it's just in time information. Don't overload the parents and the students with too much information, but then also to expose the new families to everything that we've got to offer as a school. So our co-curricular program, for example, we have 200 different activities that go on in our co-curricular program, so they get some feel of that. We're an Apple distinguished school, so they will see, you know, the technology that we use within the school. So a lot of these kind of things go on with that new family induction. But we then have a series of parent workshops over the first term, which are directly linked to new families coming in. So they will focus on maybe life in Kuala Lumpur, it's activities that you could be involved in as a family and as an adult, opportunities for spouses or non-working spouses to get involved in the school or get involved in some of our service projects. Like we work very closely with the refugee community, and a number of our new families become involved and helping out with those sort of service projects as well. So those go on for the first term, and then also we have a number of coffee mornings with the principal, coffee morning with the head of primary, head of secondary, with the new families, just to see how they're feeling and how they're settling in.
For people who don't know, what curriculums do you teach and the age levels as well?
Well, we finish off with the A level, so we're an A level school, and we do the IGCSE. We follow an amended model of the British curriculum in the primary school, but that's basically we model around the English curriculum, but we have flexibility to do what we think is best suited for our students.
Great. And languages, you cater for plenty of different languages?
Yeah, Malaysian students who have Malaysian passports have to continue with Bahasa, which is Malay, but we offer in the primary school Mandarin and a second foreign language, so a modern foreign language, French or Spanish, and that continues up through into the secondary school as well.
Great, thank you. So just to give people a flavour of what it's like living in Malaysia, perhaps you could share what you particularly enjoy doing yourself, or what's special about living and working in the area. And maybe about what you do in your leisure time when things are better and travelling around other parts of Asia, perhaps.
Yeah, so I've got quite a lot of experience in Southeast Asia. I spent 15 years in Hong Kong. Prior to coming to Malaysia, had some time in the Bahamas as well. I run an international school in the Bahamas. I think Malaysia is an absolutely fascinating country. Actually, when I taught in Hong Kong, we came as a family to Malaysia quite a lot. It's a beautiful country, and one of the things I really like about Malaysia is the road system is fantastic. So from KL, you can get out in the car. In a few hours, you can be up in the Cameron Highlands, or you can be over on the East Coast, staying in a beautiful resort, or you can in a low-key eco-tourism place as well. So there's so many opportunities to see a very, very diverse culture, I think, in terms of Malaysia. And that, again, the diversity is something that I really like. It's a country that has got that sorted. I think it seems to be country where different races and different religions seem to live and work side by side with a great deal of harmony. It's a great place to live, but it's also a great place to run an international school, because you don't feel that you're operating in a cocoon. You actually are part of the wider community, which is great. There are a number of other really, really good schools here, a good choice of schools for parents to look at.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Robert. That's been fascinating conversation about the school and hearing all about Malaysia, and I can absolutely see that parents will and their children will experience a very warm welcome. So thank you very much for your time today. Goodbye.
You're welcome. Thank you.
fascinating insight on an international school in Malaysia. So we're running out of time, but I think we've covered most of the topics we wanted to. But let's just, as we wind up, have perhaps a top tip from each of you about welcoming a new family. Brenda, shall we start with you?
Sure. I mean, my suggestion would be to make sure that companies or private transferees are working with a local established business so that you can receive the local support and handholding that you need, especially in a situation like now with the pandemic. It's a perfect example of why do-it-yourself technology tool is not the way to go at this time.
Thank you for sharing that. Johanna, what would your tip be?
I would say, be prepared for last-minute relocations and look at the family as a whole and what they need. Prepare the family as much as possible for their new environment, and be prepared to pay very close attention to the differences between education systems that they're transitioning from and to.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Françoise?
So what I would say to parents is that they must try not to worry too much if they're moving and coming in September, coming in November. We are very flexible, and we will help the families if they come in the middle of the year. They can come anytime to EIFA. They'll always be welcome, and we'll put everything in place to support and help the children and their families.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your contribution, and I'm sure people will be assured a very warm welcome from all of your organisations. So I'd like to thank Françoise, Johanna and Brenda very much for their live participation in this discussion today, and for those who've also contributed to the webinar videos that we've caught up with. So we'll just have a final goodbye wave in the tradition. So thank you very much indeed. Our audience is very welcome to get in touch with you all if you've got further questions. Thank you very much.
Bye, Fiona. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Just for those who don't know, Relocate Global has a mountain of resources that you can all access: webinars, virtual events, podcasts, videos, and we also offer coaching support and workshops. And Relocate Global has a wealth of news and articles on the website every day, as well as our education and schools section and education and schools guides, plus downloadable resources in the Global Mobility Toolkit if you want to know about all sorts of policy issues, diversity, inclusion, etc. So do sign up for all these free resources. We will have available within the next 24 hours or so a video recording of this webinar, and you can also request the presentation slides, and you can access via YouTube. Please do subscribe to all these things. We also have various community activities via the Think Women group, where you can discuss further issues, the Family Focus Network and other community networking occasions online and on the internet and virtually, as well as live coming soon, we hope. And we've got coming up a whole webinar series which you can catch up at the end. So thank you very much again to Françoise Zurbach from EIFA International School London, and you'll find these details there. To Lumos Education, Johanna Mitchell, and that's her education consultancy details there. NYC Navigator, and we spoke to President Brenda Levis. Focus, the expat community, which you're very welcome to join. They'd love to hear from you. The Garden International School and Robert Stitch, and there's details of their resources for parents worldwide, can have a look at these. And also to Focus's guests, Marymount London and Sterling Lexicon. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. The next one coming up is Knowing the Score, which is a creativity and music experience which will help you build resilience in your organisation. So a great learning and development experience there, and help you come to terms with new prospects ahead. And there's another one on Future Fit Global Mobility coming up later in the summer. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.